us out with some issues in our dairy barn. And then then in 2015, I was closer to 60 than I was to 50, and I was in a tie stall and didn't have anybody ready to take over the farm. And I said, well, I think it's time to hang up my hat on that aspect of it. And then I continued on with BioAg. And I also went with Dedel Corn Seed, and also with Farm for Profit, which is what we're going to be discussing here a little bit today, this morning, in regards to manure pack treatment. Basically, everybody's got beef cattle, that's what we're dealing with here today. Okay. So, in that regard, are we looking at cow-calf or beef cattle on pack, or what are we basically looking at here, if I may ask?
Beef on pack.
Beef on pack?
Back up.
Pretty well? Yep. Okay, good. Then gives me a bit of an idea where we're heading. If you look in front of you there, the reason why we are using a bacteria product, now this bacteria product has over 40 different strains of bacteria, fungi, and come on, algae in the product. The reasoning that we're doing is, number one, is to save possibly on straw or shavings, whatever you're using. Two is to lower the ammonia level in the barn. When you're treating the manure, the bacteria work on drawing all sorts of nutrients in and holding it in the manure itself. So obviously, you're going to end up with cleaner barn, cleaner air, possibly lower health or higher health in the animal itself. And then also another thing that's a nice sideline is lower amount of flies in the barn. It's really interesting when the pack is properly treated, that your fly, it's not going to completely get rid of your flies, but it does reduce the flies quite considerably. And also, one thing that we were just discussing here this morning too is clean out. Once you start using the product in the pack, it all depends if you're cleaning out twice a year, once a month. Usually if you're cleaning out twice a year, you might end up going back to only cleaning out once a year, if you can get away with that. Why do I say that? Once it starts composting down, number one, the pack is drier. Number two, you may or may not use less straw. Some guys don't. Some guys say, no, I still want that straw there. But once it starts composting, it doesn't. You can keep adding straw, but the bedding doesn't build up nearly as quickly. And a quick story in regards to the Farm for Profit Gerbers. I don't know if anybody knows the Gerber farm from Wellesley. They had a new dairy barn built, and they had a straw pack for their heifers and dry cows, and a sawdust pack for the milk cows. And so they were treating, they had not been treating the straw pack first. They waited, the cows went in July, putting straw down. And in December, I was there, and I said, are you putting the liquefier down on the straw? And they said, well, no, we want to wait, just like most people. We're going to clean out so that we have enough room until May to clean out again. I suggested, I said, no, start treating your pack now. So this is in December, right about now. And they kind of questioned me, and I says, just work with me, because I did use it in my farm when we had milk cows. And sure enough, it was 2 years and 2 months before they cleaned out the heifers and dry cows. Not that, it just gates. The gates between the pens, right? You can't open and swing those gates to move cattle around. That's what you're going to clean out. But here, it composted so much, and the cattle were clean. But we're talking dairy cattle here. And of course, when you get the inspector coming in and wanting to make sure that everything looks prim and proper, they were very apprehensive about seeing. And he said, well, what's the problem? The cattle are all clean, they're all shiny. It's working out very well. Along with that, what has transpired is the fact that when you go to clean out, you're not fighting to get a bucket full. You go in, it's just like sawdust, just like, you go in, you grab a bucket full and you leave. I had one farm where they figured they were going to take two and a half days to clean out this barn. It's a very large barn. And they did it in half the time. They were just flabbergasted how easy it was to clean. And there was virtually, it was a dairy barn. You're going to have some odor, but the odor was so much less in that barn. So if you don't have odor, that means your hydrogen sulfides, your ammonias, all that sort of stuff is all tied up in the manure. On your one sheet there, this colored sheet, this was all tested in Ripley, on a beef farm in Ripley. And long story short, they went ahead and they were having the same issues with this beef farm. The ammonia level was high, the smell was high, you name it, and they wanted to do something about that. And so they went ahead and they did a side-by-side test, as you can see, and all the testing that we do is done by A&L Labs. It's all third party. We don't do any, and they make the recommendations accordingly. And as you can notice there, the treated side had 15.6 pounds of nitrogen. The untreated side had only 6.7. So that increase, and you can notice that in the phosphate and potash as well, they all increased quite dramatically, and it was all in the manure. What we wanted to do, that's what we're all looking for. We're all looking for dollars. Where can we save? Where can we make money? And the dollars are situated right on the bottom there, that there was a difference of $12 a ton more nutrients in that manure, taking the price, as you can see, they took the price from the urea, MAP, and potash on the bottom of the second column there. That those were the price of that fertilizer at that point in time. And so there was a huge benefit. So applying 14 ton of treated manure per acre, that beef farm saved $169 an acre on synthetic fertilizer. It's a huge amount. On the flip side there, where you can see so those figures, those dollar figures, was only on NPK. It was not with all your micros. That was not included in there. So that's just a bare minimum of what this guy had been saving and benefiting from. Along with that, there was nothing in there in regards to reduction of antibiotics, any cattle treatment at all was also not put in there as well. So as you can see there, the difference between even your sulfur, your copper, your iron, all that sort of stuff is all most of it has all increased. Your organic matter, obviously, and the pH. So, but the way we treat that manure, as you see, the current treatment per bale is we use 10. So I don't have it here, it'll be on your other sheet. where it's two different products. They're both liquid products. One is manure liquefier, and the other one is pH buffer. And the pH buffer is the feeder for the bacteria in the manure liquefier. So you mix mix the water, pH buffer, and manure liquefier as stated, and in that recipe form. And then you can either, it's bacteria. You don't have to be specific that every inch gets covered. As long as it's on the straw somewhere, the cattle are going to move around. Bacteria, we all know bacteria move on the roll. And so you get, as long as it gets into the pen, cattle move it around, and usually it's on a per bale basis. And as you notice there, you're looking at about $6.62 a big bale for that's 1,400 square feet. And if you look down further, this is at this operation. They use 2 bales a week. They actually use 3 bales a week, but they only inoculated 2. And so in the end, when it was all said and done, the investment was, in the end, was $1,400. The manure value was $18,000. So it was a huge, basically, more than a 10%. You see there, 1,500 metric ton at $12 a ton. So $18,000 of benefit that they had gained on that aspect. Now with that, yeah, the manure, the whole atmosphere and the environment in the barn is just so much cleaner, so much healthier. We use this also in, like I said, chicken barns. It just starts the bedding process or the composting process. And yeah, it's just overall, besides the money value, it's also the environment in the barn. Do I have any questions? I do that a whole lot better with questions. Ted?
On that trial, did they measure the volume or the weight of the 2 different manures? Because there'd be quite a saving in transportation and handling of the manure if it does compost in the barn.
That was one thing that I don't believe that they did, that aspect. All they know is that there was less manure to spread. Yeah. And usually we think if I go back to Dave, you know Dave Colling. Dave Colling was involved with this years ago. And I remember him saying a third less. Yeah.
That's here on the bulk density.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Do you have any information or anybody that's worked on it with a cow-calf operation where they're in their claiming pens?
There likely are people using it. I don't have anybody personally myself. I'm more on the dairy end of it. And, yeah, I would think that there likely is enough people that are using it. One note of caution is, I will say, is that by using the product, it's a management tool.
Yep.
And you want to, well, as you're working in the barn, you'll be watching it anyway, is you don't want to use too much. You can end up using too much, where in the end, it gets too soft.
Okay.
You want to make sure that it stays firm on the top. And because yes, we have had guys that had beef cows. I don't know if the calves were with them, that I don't know. And that they were sinking right to the bottom. And they were, yeah, of course, they were not happy with that aspect of it. But as long as it stays somewhat firm on the top and dry, then, and that's a big thing, you know, having clean cows, clean cattle. I was amazed. I was in a beef barn, slanted floor beef barn. I didn't realize that they were packed in so tight. I mean, yeah, Yeah, you guys understand what I'm saying.
They don't get many cattle per square foot.
No, they do not. So I said to him, I said, so why is that the case? Well, that way all the river goes down and they don't get dirty. Oh, really? You know, Ted, I got way too much organic background in me. It just didn't sit right with me, but hey, that's the industry, right? Yeah. But we do, we are treating those barns as well for the same reasons. Theirs basically, so, like I was mentioning this morning, keep an eye on my time there, Noah.
You've got a few minutes, yeah.
Okay, so what we use here is aerobic bacteria. All right, it needs oxygen to work. What we use in a manure pit is anaerobic bacteria. And because the anaerobic bacteria actually break down the solids in the pit. And that's a whole other, that's another hour and a half discussion. And I do have pictures of how that works, and it works very well. But I'm dealing with dairy barns that have 10-foot pits and 8 feet of solids. We got a challenge. We're working on it. We're making headway, but it's one of these barns that have the raceway system, and they're supposed to be able to. Yeah, I've got a number of them that we're having some challenges with. But in regards to the pack, that's what we're here for. There is, and also there, as you know, you're noticing that the manure liquefier brochure in there. It gives you a lot more detail of what you can read on your own, and I'll leave some cards around. Otherwise, just give on that brochure. There's the office is in Wellesley, the Gerber Farms, and they're more than willing to have somebody come up into this neck of the woods. There are dealers up here, but I'm from the Clinton area. But you can always call me. I'm always available to call to get information from. So, hi, Catherine. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
So you talked about inoculating the bale. Do most people just pour it on the bale and then spread it around?
That's easiest. We're never looking for more work.
Well, I'm just trying to think how that's going to work with employees and people that are doing it. Whether they're going to go with a sprayer and spray around the pen, or you just pour it on the bale.
We've done any way, shape, or form that you could think of has been done. What I would like to do, if we start from scratch, I'd like to first get the floor done, bare floor. We did in a chicken barn. They actually did an ammonia test in a chicken barn that was empty. One was brand new, cement floor. Of course, the ammonia level was nil. An older barn, empty, cleaned, with plywood. And it was amazing how much ammonia was coming out of that barn. I don't have the numbers with me, but it was astounding on how high the ammonia level was in those barns. And so what we do there, I'd like to get the floor done, that way the floor is inoculated, and then from there on, just put it up either on the bale or if you want. It all depends on the size of operation. Most of the operations are so big now that they got the bale shredders. We just throw the inoculant on the bale and let them blow it across the barn, and that works just as well.
If I can just add something quick.
Yeah.
What we did with our compost pack is we mixed it up in a pail,
Right.
and then we took a watering can, 10-liter watering can, and then just walked along, and I just kind of switched it out, and actually it took me about 15 minutes to get our whole pack done, and we were about a month or so.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, excellent point.
So you don't need to do it every time you bid. Just
At the first we would, but then after that it's by eyesight. It's a management tool. Good point. And like I said on there, when you're mixing it, very important to mix it according to that recipe. water, pH buffer, and mineral liquefier. Reason being, and then even if you put it in together, mixed up, and left it for a day, because the bacteria is working and living on the pH buffer, and it will actually grow 4 times in 10 days. And so you have that much more product to be able to put on, or bacteria to put on the straw. Yeah, any way, shape, or form that you can get it on. And I was just going to say that the one thing that with like any product, you know, it works better in the pack than in the jug. But many guys over the years, doing this 15 years, had many guys say, "Oh, this stuff doesn't work." I said, "So where have you got it stored?" "Oh, well, it's over here in the milk house." "Yeah? So why is it still in the milk house and not in the pen or on the pack?" "Well, you know," I said, "Yeah, I understand. Farmed, know exactly what it is. It's another job that has to be done. That's why we try to keep it as simple as possible and just have it done. That hopefully it's done on a regular basis. And yeah, I had one guy who was 2 years. He finally called up and he says, "I got a problem." He says, "The manure's coming through the slats." So I said, I knew him quite well. I said, "Bart, how many jugs have you still got left?" The amount of product I brought was enough for 1 year. And well, this was 2 years later. I had talked to him in the meantime, and so they just tried to encourage them to use it. And he says, "Yeah, I know." I says, "Look, let's not fool around. Just get it in the bin." And sure enough, but then again, he had that problem of solids coming through the slats. Yeah. Not a fun deal. Any other
Hey, so we are going to cover a topic I'm sure you've heard about, and maybe a bunch of you have been trying to farm without anyways, but I'm going to just cover a bit about how to reduce antibiotic use in beef herds, and it's not going to be, instead of this antibiotic, use this. Instead of needling them with this, needle them with this, because that's not how it works. So what we're going to focus on is creating good health so that you need to use it less. And not only is less, but that it works when you use it and you don't get those animals that are repeat offenders, like constantly sick. You treat them once, but a week later they come back and they're sick again. So basically what I'm going to cover is how we can create an animal that will A, respond to antibiotics if needed, because animals do get sick, it happens, and B, not need them at all. So, what do we use antibiotics for? So I've listed a few things: calves, scours, diarrhea, pneumonia, that's quite common, foot rot, for example, and then less common for beef is mastitis or metritis. Basically any kind of infection that your animals would be getting. Can anyone think of anything else, or has anyone used antibiotics for anything else in their herds? Nope, got it covered. Would you say pneumonia is probably the most common thing you're treating? I just want to get kind of an overall picture so I know what to focus on.
Scours,
Scours
or
and
foot rot,
young calves.
or foot rot in
Foot rot
summer.
in the summer. Okay, anyone else? I'll cover something. All right, next slide. So, what are antibiotics and what do they do? So, an antibiotic is a concentrated toxin that kills bacteria. So it won't work on viruses, and they kill all bacteria. So not just the bad ones, they'll kill all the bacteria or many other beneficial bacteria in the body. For an antibiotic to work, it still needs the animal's input, so the animal still has to have a properly functioning immune system. And resistance can develop if it's not used properly. So then you start with penicillin, you're using it, it works here and there. Then you gotta go to the heavier drugs like the Nuflor. And then you ask the vet, well, I've used both, what do I use now? You're basically out of options. Like antibiotics aren't gonna help you at that point. Something else is wrong. So then you're basically developing resistance in your herd the more you use it. So for example, our herd, when we need antibiotics, all we need is penicillin, like the Deficillin, and that'll usually, if it's a true infection and it's been diagnosed properly, the penicillin works great. Basically within 12 hours, they're looking up. So if you're not getting a response from your antibiotics, it's not an antibiotic deficiency, there's something else going on. And then proper diagnosis is important for treatment. I mean, you don't want to call the vet out for every single case, but you have to know what you're treating and if it's really an infection or has something else happened. Or are you overlooking something else? So in the nutrition side or the management side. So I'm not saying don't use them, they can be life-saving. It's a great invention still. It's overused these days. But if you're using it too often, that means the cause is not a bacteria. So you have to look into why you're reaching for the antibiotics all the time. Any questions so far? Comments? It makes sense, right? Yeah. I think this group would all know. So like I said, it's not the presence of a bug, it's the terrain. What have you done to that animal? Sorry, I'm not blaming you guys. I always do this. This is how I talk. You can yell back at me and be like, not my fault. But what have you done to create this environment that has allowed the animal to get an infection, get sick, right? So some examples are toxicity. Are you feeding moldy feeds? There could be molds in your feeds that you don't even realize. Acidosis. Are you feeding, let's say, it doesn't have much of beef, but too much grain, or an unbalanced diet to the point where their gut isn't functioning properly, and that means the immune system can't function properly. Mineral and nutrient deficiencies. If you go too long without providing minerals, you're feeding feeds that are low in certain minerals. Over time and over generations, you'll get sort of a deep-seated deficiency that is really hard to treat. And then body temperature, especially today is a good example. Where are your calves? Where are your calves? Right? Are they protected out of the wind? So all these factors can go into why your animal might be getting sick. So let's talk a little bit about the immune system. So it's the body's natural defense against invading bacteria and viruses. It is very effective when the animal is healthy. Like we could never ever create something this amazing, like to fight off infections and live in this environment where we're surrounded by toxins, right? The immune system is key. But it needs proper nutrition and antioxidants to work properly. So when I'm talking about antioxidants, basically for the immune system, an antioxidant is what takes the garbage that the immune system has kind of picked up and neutralizes it so the body can kick it out. So if you don't have enough antioxidants in the body, what happens is this junk builds up and it doesn't get released out. And then that junk is actually what's making the animal sicker. Or that's why the animal can't recover. Okay, so how do we support the immune system? There's quite a few ways, and it goes all the way back to birth, right? So we're not going to start this, let's say, 2 months before winter or 2 months before calving. We're going to do this all year round, right? So specifically for immune system, the animal has to have enough energy. It has to be consuming enough energy. Without energy, the immune system can't work. It's quite energy intensive. So by energy, I mean, doesn't mean grain. It means, are you feeding hays that support whatever stage of production they're in, right? Are you feeding digestible hays? Are you making sure that they are able to eat what they're supposed to be eating, right? So there's many things that can go wrong there. Either it's not feed availability, or meaning that they can't get to the feeder, or meaning that the feed has too much fiber that they physically cannot eat enough of it to get the energy out of it. And then you'll see that when you've got these really big, I mean, when they're pregnant, they'll get big and round. But if you've got cows that are big and round, roly-polies, with a really thin spine, like you can feel their spine, that means they're definitely not getting enough energy. They're trying to eat as much as they can, but they simply can't take enough out of their food. And then you need protein to make both antibodies in the body to fight things off, but you also need it to make colostrum for the calves. And then that's the next part, right? Everyone knows if you don't get the colostrum in that calf, it's behind from the get-go. It's going to be a struggle throughout its entire life. And then, as always, minerals and vitamin needs need to be met, and those will change depending on where in production they are, and based on if they're getting pasture or what kind of other changes are going on. And then you always want to reduce toxins in the feed and the environment because those will use up antioxidants. Reduce stress. So a stressful event, doesn't matter how healthy they are, can bring an animal's immune system down, right? And stress can be handling, calving, a storm, anything that you would think is an upset because cows like routine, right? If there's a change, especially beef cows, it depends on your herd, but some of them you look at them funny and that's stressful for them, right? So it depends on your herd, but if you feel like they've gone through a stressor, that is affecting their body because the mind is connected to the body. You want to support gut health, so BioEye has tons of things for that. So if you've always got that going on the baseline, they're more able to bounce back after stress, after a problem, because they have that regulation system in their gut. You want to control environmental factors. So if a body gets chilled in the cold like today, especially a calf, what happens is, first of all, the gut stops. So it freezes, and then you get indigestion. But what also happens is the body is supposed to work at a certain temperature, right? So it's able to do all the enzymatic reactions and everything at a certain temperature, which is body temperature. So once that dips below, and they can't bring it back up, either they don't have enough energy, or they just got really, really cold and they can't bring it back up, they can't go into shelter, then everything is going to be affected because the body needs to be at that temperature to be working properly. And the immune system, same way, needs to be at that temperature. And then, like I said before, providing antioxidants. So an example of an antioxidant you can easily access is kelp. So it's loaded with antioxidants. And then a lot of vitamins and minerals are also act as antioxidants. And then the kelp actually has a lot of vitamins in it as well that act as antioxidants. So depending on what stage your cows are at, or if you see a stressor that's coming, you can increase or add those things to their diet. So like I said, the body uses energy to create heat for itself too, right? So if you don't have enough energy, if you're in the cold and you don't have enough energy, you're going to freeze much faster. Or your body is going to dip below normal body temperature much faster than if you've got all the groceries, right? So yeah, we all see these beef cows outside covered in snow, they're fine, right? Well, some of them are, but some of them really are not, right? And yeah, young animals need a warmer environment. So a calf less than 3 days old cannot regulate their own body temperature. So if they're out in the freezing cold, their temperature is going to drop significantly more than a cow, and they will get sick for sure. And the same goes the other way. In heat stress, before they reach 3 days of age, they cannot control body temperature themselves. So the mom, she helps, she lies close to the calf, but sometimes that's not enough. All right, and then, I don't want to blame you guys, but it's kind of easy to just needle a cow off again, right? Or needle a calf, send them off again. But healing and sick care requires you to pay more attention to them. So if you have a sick animal, you need to isolate them in a warmer, drier spot that has more resources. So the water should be right there. On a day like today, if you have a sick cow, she should be drinking warm water. She needs to warm up. The feed should be right there. There shouldn't be bully cows pushing her out of the way. She's just standing back there. Yeah, you treated her, but she's not even getting feed, right? So she's not going to get better. Warmth, like I said, fluids, especially your calves. The thing that saves calves is with scours is rehydration. It is not antibiotics. It is rehydration. And you want to do everything you can to encourage them to start eating again. Because once a ruminant is eating, she's basically started herself up again. Eating and chewing cud. So if I see a sick animal and they're not eating, but they start to eat, then I'm like, okay, we're getting there. We're going to get there. She might still look like crap, but if she's eating, then that means we're getting there. You see her chewing cud? Yes, we're on our way, right? So if you can get them to eat, and if they won't eat the feed that you've offered them, go find a different feed. I'm not saying go to grains, because you don't want to upset their gut and create acidosis, especially those cows that have never seen grain before. But you want a highly digestible hay, potentially an alfalfa, just something that they want to eat and they want to. So it makes them get up and start taking part in their own healing. Pain control can be very helpful. So happens in dairy cows too. I imagine beef cows as well. Once they're in pain sometimes, they feel like, oh, that's it, I'm done, right? They kind of give up. So they could heal themselves, there's no problem there. Because they're feeling pain, they don't want to, and they don't want to eat. So there's cases where you just need some pain control. You don't need the antibiotics. She looks like she's getting there, but she's still not. You reach for the pain control, and that helps in calves as well. We had a calf, she had severe colic. She was down and kicking, and everything else looked good. Like, I assessed her, she just had severe gut pain. Gave her Medicam, and then that helped her get through it. In the morning, she was up, bouncing around like nothing had happened, right? And then while they're sick, you also want to boost their antioxidants. So you can give them kelp. If they're not eating, that's not going to help too much. But there are other there are herbs and things like that you can provide to boost their antioxidants as well. And you can reach for your vitamin A, D, and E. Those are all antioxidants. So there is an injectable available. BioEgg doesn't have it, but that's something you can kind of have in your toolbox instead of antibiotics, is to give them a vitamin boost. And then always give them extra vitamins. So a sick cow, sick calf, throw the kelp out for them. And they might go crazy for it. And then I don't know how much you guys want me to get in homeopathics, but there's always a homeopathic option. And the thing with them is they're supportive. So you can't only use homeopathics. It won't help in the way that you're hoping, right? It needs to be along with supportive care. And they can actually help a lot to turn things around and increase the recovery time. But it shouldn't be the only thing you're using, is basically what I'm saying. You need all this isolation, more fluids, everything like that. So, yeah, without going into the details of how minerals and vitamins help, I think Donna will be covering that a little bit. But yeah, so don't ignore your sick animals. I think that's the biggest part of recovery, is that care. And it might be a pain for a day or two, but it means you've got a healthier cow with you. Yeah. So I don't know if you guys want me to go over a couple common cases. How much time do I have? I've totally lost track.
You have 15 minutes.
15 minutes? Okay. Yeah, so we have time. Okay. So we have time to go over some cases. Okay. So this is I'll go through a scenario that I see all the time. Okay. You have, and I'll go over more of this in my next presentation, so they kind of overlap, but I'll cover what I can, and then I'll take questions, and you can take it wherever you guys want. You have a calf born, maybe it's a little chilly, right? You get in there, you make sure it's drinking, it gets some colostrum, right? So you see it supple, it gets some colostrum, it's good, but it's still cold outside, right? But you're providing care, maybe you're even putting on a calf coat. But all of a sudden you see the calf and it has scours, right? But it's still jumping around, it's still okay, right? So then you kind of watch it, it's doing okay still. 2-3 weeks later, pneumonia. Where should you have intervened? All the way back when it has scours. So what happened? Got chilled, didn't get enough colostrum, the gut didn't set up properly, didn't pick up antibodies that it needed. And then, even though it was in a warm environment, everything was fine, it caught pneumonia, or got pneumonia, because of what happened right at birth, right? So it's not, you can't always look just a day or two before, it could be happening much earlier. So my next presentation, I'm gonna focus on that. What are you doing with that newborn calf? Or even before that calf is conceived, right? So if you're able to see that and you can think back, that then you're much less likely to have to use antibiotics for this presentation's sake. But those are kind of scenarios that I see happening. And it's hard when I get a call, what do I do? Like, well, you should have done a lot before. So you are gonna have to reach for antibiotics. You are gonna have to do the isolation and forms. Another thing I wanna say, and I'll say that in the other presentation too, when you have a sick calf, take her and her mama out. If her mama is stressed, being away from everyone else, just bring another cow-calf pair, right? You have to isolate these calves. They will not heal out there on their own in a big group. And then I'll quickly cover foot rot. So foot rot basically is telling you you have inflammation in their bodies and it's come out through their feet. So you see it a lot of times in summer, late summer. And what's actually been happening is they've eaten lush grass, and that's increased the nitrogen circulating in their body. They've gone through heat stress, so that makes the vessels weak. And then that kind of pops out in their feet, and they get sore feet. So that happens a lot. Now, you can help mitigate that with making sure you have proper minerals in the diet, so zinc and sulfur, for example. But basically, that's kind of the scenario that happened. So 2 things you could have done is given them fiber while they're on their lush grass, so that they don't get that nitrogen boost through their blood. And then heat stress, give them some way of cooling off if you aren't already. I know it's really hard. Sometimes it just gets so hot, but anything you can think of to help them. Shade, maybe bring them in the barn. Like, it seems counterintuitive, but maybe the barn is cooler, or a place that they are relieved from flies, because flies, as soon as the flies start, the cows are standing all day long, right? And that's harder on their feet, so that's gonna break down their feet as well. So if you can bring them into an area, maybe just has the fans, just something to give them a bit of relief, that's going to prevent cases of foot rot. So they're not standing on their feet all day long. So that's just kind of 2 ways of intervening. Yeah.
It's walking through mud, where you go off the concrete and there's a wet spot. Seems like there's always some place where they have to walk through mud. Is that a factor, or is it not?
It can be, but it's not. It's like, well, it's like saying, oh, I got manure on my hand, I'm gonna get an infection now, right? There have to be other factors at play, right? So yeah, you can make abrasions and stuff, but that's not really a foot rot. That's more of like, and then that's the thing too about diagnosis of foot rot. Do you have foot rot, or does she just have a bruise on her sole, or is there an ulcer coming through? Antibiotics will really only work for the foot rot actual actual foot rot infection. If it's something else, antibiotics won't help it. If it's an ulcer, she'll basically, if you don't treat her, she'll kind of form her foot all funny until it's put in a way where she can, like, takes pressure off the ulcer, and then she'll start walking a little better all the time, but it's still there, and it takes a long time to heal. If it's an abscess, it's gotta blow open, and then she'll feel relief. So, if you have issues where you can lift feet, you can learn a lot and do a lot, because usually, I mean, foot rot does happen, but it's not always diagnosed properly. A lot of other things can happen, and bulls especially, bulls will get their sore feet because they're massive animals walking on these feet, and they're also always phosphorus deficient. So your bull needs a completely different mineral than your cows because they're doing different work, right? And different feed as well. I went off on a tangent, but does that make sense? So yeah, I mean, if you are wet, you can get sort of skin abrasions and skin infections. You won't see it as much if your animal has a good immune system and is healthy, right? So cause isn't always effect. Does that make sense? Yeah, I mean, it's a factor, but it's not the main factor. Okay, one more little point. Oh no, didn't make it in. It's okay. All right. All I wanted to say is one line. What about the livestock in your soil that is feeding your animals, right? That's a huge factor on what goes on in the rumen, and that dictates the health of the animal. Okay? I think a lot of you guys aren't conventional with pesticides and fertilizer, but you have to be aware, and that'll show up in feed tests as well if you have mineral imbalance. If you're not trying to correct that, you're going to have effect on the animal. One example is high potassium. If she's a dry cow and she gets too much potassium, she's going to have problems with calcium when she has it. Especially if you're not supplementing extra calcium, for example. Yeah. So always be realizing that the feed you put in front of them, you are what you eat, right? It's going to be effective. So I like seeing feed samples because you can tell a lot from it and what's going on, not only in that plant, but also in the soil. Okay, any more questions? Or specific examples you want me to go over? Yeah.
Question, for foot rot, is there a specific time of year that would make a farmer struggle more? Like, I'm thinking, I had a feedlot about a year and a half to 2 years ago. We came in, the weather it was in the spring, right, when the weather was kind of changing. I mean, they've got 1,500 head of cattle under one roof. And every day, he's pulling out, 5 head of cattle that all have foot rot.
Right. Yeah.
And I know the big thing I told him was that he wasn't bedding the pens very regularly, and he had a lot of wet manure concentrated right up by the feed bunk.
Yeah.
But are you saying, like, I should have been looking at the minerals more closely?
You always look at the feed, so if he changes ration to feed more grain. Like, I mean, you need to mitigate that for sure. They can't be in mud and muck and manure. Hygiene is definitely one of the factors you need to control, but why all of a sudden, right? So maybe they changed to more grain, or changed the feed in another way that made them more susceptible to it.
Now, here's the other question, which of zinc and sulfur is more important for foot rot?
Well, what's in your feeds, right? If you're extremely low in sulfur, you're gonna need to supplement. If you're low in both, you need to supplement both. Yeah, because you're asking a lot from these animals, right? They're not like us where we're just, I mean, we're hardworking farmers, sure. We need a bit more than your average city person that is not doing much physical movement. But these are production animals, so we need to support that production. If you don't, they're not gonna perform for you. They're not city folk sitting on the computer all day. They need to be supported. Yeah, so my next talk will be about the early calf nutrition. So then we'll go over little bit, and that'll kind of, so if you focus on your calf, that's gonna bring them through the whole production stage healthy, right? So we'll go through that.
You can take a quick break if you need to use the washroom. Our other presenter, he has come from quite a distance and he's here.
Hi, I'm Sammy Nolan. I'm the sales manager at ProRich Seed in Mount Elgin. And we have an alfalfa grass company. And I'm here to talk to you guys about the approach of how to choose the right mix for your operation. Typically, most forage companies in the industry, they'll present set mixes to farmers and relay the idea that, you know, your neighbor uses this mix and he's happy, so maybe you want to try it. Which makes a lot of sense for a lot of companies, because having a set mix means that when we start mixing seed, we just mix the same batch at thousands of bags and then just put a name on it, a different name. At our business at ProRich, we actually custom blend every mix. So every farmer has a tailor-suited mix that works for him. Part of the reason also is there's different soil types everywhere, and a farmer can have 100 acres and every parcel he has of 20 acres or 30 acres is pretty much different than the other piece of land he seeded out 3 or 4 years ago. So the approach is to start from soil type. And every time we talk to points of sales to farmers, we start with what is the soil type that you're looking at in this field. Once we have a soil type figured out, we typically know what grasses and what alfalfa, if we're using alfalfa, would be most suitable for that piece of ground. There's guys that are in the dairy business that are trying to get the highest amount of protein and their 4-cut systems. And there's beef guys such as yourselves that for the most part, it's a 3-cut system. The protein is important, but that's not the main agenda when you're cutting hay or haylage for your beef cows. So the first approach is your soil type. And if you're a clay loam, which would be the easiest standard to use, then everything is possible. If you're heavier ground, then you're definitely going to have to adapt the grasses you choose, because you will not be able to be on that ground potentially so early and so late. So let's kind of start with a mix, I would say, that a beef farmer typically would use, and that would be a 60% alfalfa mix, which is where a farmer typically in the beef industry feels comfortable. And not to say that guys don't grow 80% or 20%, but let's just use that as an example, 60% alfalfa. The grasses, for the most part, is what's going to conduct a farmer in cutting times. So how many of you guys grow alfalfa? Let's start with that in your mix. Okay, so everybody. So early spring, typically we have lots of moisture, grasses look luscious, everything is great, but your alfalfa is still sleeping. It's not growing as fast as the grasses. Grasses like it cool and wet. And with the right kind of grasses, you're not in much of a hurry. With the wrong kind of grasses, you're looking at this field and you're going, shit, all this stuff is headed out. My alfalfa isn't ready. I don't want 20% protein. I'm looking for that 15, 16% digestible stuff. But if I don't cut it now, my fiber is going to look like crap. So I'm going to go and cut it. And that's what typically guys do. They end up cutting it. So the choices of grasses that will not conduct a farmer, but rather the farmer will conduct his cutting time, are 3. Fescues, Timothy, and Brome. Those are the 3 species, the three varieties, the three species of grasses that I'd like you to focus on. And the reason is even when these grasses head out and they're cut late, they're palatable. There isn't an animal out there that doesn't eat timothy. When it's all headed out, or if it's young, they're gonna eat it. If it's goats, it's sheep, it's cows, it's horses, they'll all eat timothy. Brome is a grass that I would say is my favorite in its character because it's extremely dependable. It's a rhizome grass, which means it grows a root downwards and it will come up and reroot itself over and over again. Reed canary and brome are the same species, only reed canary, if you don't cut it early, it's extremely coarse and it's good for bedding. Even beef cows are very picky with reed canary if it's overly mature. Brome is an old grass, it's nothing special, but it holds digestibility the longest, which means any animal eating it will do well with it, and they will eat it. In Alberta, for example, most of the farmers I deal with, big feedlots, they love brome because it's dependable, because the root is so deep in the ground, it has the ability to come in for second cut, which a lot of grasses don't really come in second cut. There's a little bit there in the fescues. Timothy is hit and miss. Typically, the first cut is when you really see it, and it really comes for a second cut once in a while when you're lucky. But the brome will be there, second cut. And especially when we're talking about cow-calves operation, you know, if you have the luxury of having a tremendous amount of acreage and you have the right employees in place and your own equipment and you're not waiting on anybody to bale for you and cut for you, then you can grow separate fields for separate reasons. But if you took a typical grass mix, let's keep alfalfa out of it, with timothy, tall fescue, and brome, you will have 3 cuts. And those grasses combined together will do very well for calves. They will do very well for your cows. Now, you would have to add some protein for your cows if you're not using alfalfa, but those are the 3 grasses I like to focus on. So, fescues, tall fescue was a very bad word used with farmers back in the day because tall fescue was a grass that when it headed out, it looked just like ryegrass, but when it headed out, it was like Velcro. Cows would literally eat and choke on it. They hated it. And they would sort through it. It's very easy. It was very easy to see that. But the industry has made a long way with the fescue grasses because of their ability to root themselves deeper in the ground, therefore come in drier conditions, come in for a second cut. And now the industry calls it a soft leaf tall fescue. You will notice that in brochures of every company, if it's meadow fescue, tall fescue, it's a soft leaf. And it works that way. So how many of you guys would cut two times a year, and how many would cut 3 times a year? Ideally. 3. 3. 2. Okay.
You do 2, but
Okay.
sometimes.
Right. Sometimes you have an option to take a third, and you take it if you need it, if you want it to, etc. So if you're going to go for 3 cuts, then you want to have the fescue in it. And the reason is because brome won't be there after second cut, and timothy won't. The fescues will. If you're a 2-cut system, and you know you're doing 2 cuts, well, timothy, alfalfa, and brome is what you want to use. And it's not very sexy to say timothy and brome because it sounds like, wait a second, my dad, my grandfather grew that stuff. Here I am learning about how I'm supposed to do something that was done 50 years ago. But the reality is that those grasses on a 2-cut system will not only produce for you, but they will also do what you want them to do at the right time of year compared to the wrong time of year. So when we have seasons like early springs, it's really wet out there, and you're looking at this grass growing, and you're going, holy smokes, like this is going to be a beautiful field compared to a field that has orchard grass in it, which looks beautiful, it's lush, it's very thick. By the time you get to that field, It's not good, and your calves are not gonna like the orchard. Maybe your cows will get away with it, your calves won't. So the approach is, when you're cutting 2 or 3 times, is to really build that mix according to your own operation. If you're cutting 3 times a year, you're going to take your alfalfa at a decent time, not the earliest guy on the field, but also not too late. You want to get that cut of alfalfa. Probably the 5th of June would be kind of ideal because you'll also get a lot of volume for it. And that's one of the situations in the fields now when guys are going for 4 cuts. They talk a lot about their high protein levels. They're proud of it. A lot of times you walk in the barn and it's splashed all over the place. It didn't digest. It just came in and left. And so that's part of where a beef farmer has the luxury of waiting a little more because he doesn't need that rocket fuel. He doesn't need 20% protein, which in the dairy industry would be the ideal number is 20%. He needs that 15-16%. You can achieve that from oats and peas if you use that as a cover crop. Now, depending on what kind of drills are used nowadays, other than an air drill, those fancy new air drills, brome always has to be separate. You can never put it in your grass box. But if you're going to use a cover crop, which a lot of people use nowadays, a lot of farmers are into cover crops, you mix it in with your oats, your oats and peas, your silo buster, and then guys go, well, wait a second, like that goes in 1 inch in the ground, 1.5 inches. With brome, fortunately, because it develops a root before it comes up, it takes a year for it to actually come out of the ground. That's not a problem. Ideally, I tell farmers all the time, that's okay, just set your grain box to the shallowest setting, and you'll be fine. And it works. Grain does not have to be in so early. The cover crop does not have to be in so early. In case you're wondering, that's kind of what the industry did back in the day because farmers grew a crop of grain to actually combine the grain, and that had to be in early in order to get a good crop in decent time. But when you're using it as a cover crop, you can go in anytime, probably till the end of June, unlike the last 2 years when we've seen how dry it gets. If you're going according to history, you can go in late with your grain. The peas are a legume, so is alfalfa. People often call me, the 5th of June, the 10th of June. Sammy, I'm so late, I didn't get to it, my field wasn't, whatever. Go in now. Alfalfa loves it hot. It's a legume. The grasses take time to establish. And that's really why when I look at fields every year in the springtime and I walk fields, I walk the field because I want to see if there's any issues we can fix. You can fix it in May and June. Very hard to fix a field in July. You can't, you basically have to wait till August till you can fix a field if you want to fix a field. And I see more and more guys that seed in June with a better looking first cut than guys who went in the end of April because they were in a hurry. That alfalfa takes time when it's cold, and instead what you get is a lot of weeds. So it's knowing what field you're going into, and it's knowing what the agenda is. There's grasses out there that we can talk about, but to make things simple, not complicated, those are the 3 grasses I'd like you to focus on. If you're on a very short rotation, if you're rotating every 3 to 4 years, and you like orchard grass, and you are aggressive with your first cut, and you have nice open ground or tiled ground that, even when it's wet 2 days ago, it's dry, you can go in, and you love orchard, that's fine. The first year or 2, you're going to see that orchard mature late, and that's why they call it a late maturing orchard. But that orchard becomes earlier and earlier every year because the more the root is established, the earlier it shoots ahead. So competitors of my company basically put orchard, when it came out, this late maturing orchard, they put it in every bag. Guys loved it the first year or two because it's an optical illusion. You look at the orchard and go, holy smoke, there's so much grass here. But if you went into the field and you went to the root and you bunched it all together, you would see there's a radius that there's nothing there. Because nothing can compete with orchard. And the reason they started with 3% in every bag was because A, it can go in any drill, an International, a John Deere, it will go in any drill at 3%. And second of all, is that 3% turns into 20 within 4 years. It multiplies in your field. And then you get this real bumpy ride on orchard. Now, again, if you're a farmer who's cutting 4 times a year, that orchard is probably going to be beneficial to you. But you will have to be there earlier and earlier after the second year. So if on the second year you cut the 15th of May, because that was the ideal time to cut it, the next year it'll probably be the 10th of May. The year after that it's going to be the 5th of May. And the guys that keep fields for many, many years because they wait for the alfalfa to peter out and then it becomes their dry cow hay or their calf hay, well, those guys will know they got to be out there in April to cut, and that's not going to happen. Simple as that. That's pretty much what I'd like to focus on. And if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I have a pasture, well, paddock, almost one pasture. We talked about orchard grass.
Yep.
Kind of inherited it. It's like you say, it's almost like all orchard grass now, where it comes out so early,
Right.
and it becomes wiry, and like
Right.
cows don't really. How do
you fix it
How
without
do you fix it?
completely turning it over?
Yes, exactly.
You can't. You can't. I like to often tell people the truth rather than what they want to hear, so you can't. So how many calves would be on this piece of ground?
Well, really, it's I don't know, it's not a huge section, but I don't know if it'd be, let's say 7 or 8 acres or something like that.
Yeah. It's actually, nowadays, when you look at the price of land, you can excuse turning over ground. That's the truth. Nobody wants to turn over a pasture. Nobody. And it doesn't matter if it's 8 acres or it's 160 acres in Saskatchewan. Nobody wants to turn over a pasture. The orchard is doing what it's supposed to do. The brome, for example, if you leave it there and you feed it nitrogen, it'll take over too. It won't be as heavy and productive as the orchard, and it will stay more palatable, but it'll take over too. So the answer to that is you can't fix it because whatever you plant in there has close to none of a chance coming through because that orchard is so thick, so competitive. How is that tiny little grass going to poke through that beautiful mushroom of grass? You can't. So, I'm 41, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I'd say probably, my first few years, I just wanted to sell anything to anybody. So we had this overseeding mix, which we call a heavy grazing or overseeding mix, and it's meant for situations like that, where a guy just wants to overseed, get some clovers, get some other grasses, to thicken up the areas that aren't really growing much. And what I found out a few years later is I was doing a disservice because, and the reality was, if there were a lot of bare spots, it did okay. But where it was thick, nobody saw anything. And so you kind of discredited yourself by saying, oh yeah, I got an overseeding mix, it works great. It actually works great on bare ground. Like you put it there and it grows beautifully. But then you have all the seed going to waste, and that's why often I tell guys, listen, trust me, you don't want to do this. It's like, I get you don't want to spend thousands, but you're going to spend close to $1,000 and you're going to see nothing come out of it. There's no point of it, especially with the orchard, because the orchard will keep multiplying in your field to the point where it won't be able to grow anymore. And you can't expect orchard to find just the bare spots, obviously, because it doesn't know, but I would say your best bet is to start over, unfortunately. And if you do, and you're gonna keep this as a permanent pasture, because there's two types of pastures. One is a permanent pasture and one is a permanent hay pasture. Permanent pasture, you grow it, your animals graze it, that's it. Permanent hay pasture is one that you would take, typically you would take the first cut off, and then you would let your animals out there. And so on those permanent pastures we have, we don't put any orchard in anymore. We have it in our set mix, but I told all my salespeople, get it out there. Because there's no point of having it there. It's an optical illusion for a farmer. He'll be happy the first 3 years. It's gonna look very lush, and then he's gonna turn around and have you a problem 5 years later, right? And when the time comes, if you said, oh yeah, I'd actually want you or Noah to actually come out and look at this field, tell me what you think we should grow here. Some guys do rotational grazing. If you're saying this is a stationary, all my animals are here, they're not going elsewhere, then we'd also find a mix that isn't too aggressive. Like everybody wants to grow a shit ton of feed till it's out of control, and then it turns into a shit ton of feed that isn't good. So depending on how many animals on how many acres is where we decide how much alfalfa, how much clover, if at all, and what kind of grasses we want to use. That question has been thrown at me so many times, and it's never what a guy wants to hear. You always see the face, and it's like, oh man, I wish this kid had a solution. But the
Thanks
honest
for
fact
asking.
is,
I
you
was
gotta
gonna
start
ask
over.
the same question, but I got 75 acres
Oh,
like
yeah.
that.
I have a customer in the area of Olds, Alberta, and is this 7 or 8 acres hilly?
Yep.
Okay, well, he had 160 acres like this. And he says, do you know how hard it is to go in with a drill like that? Like, how am I supposed to even go in and seed it? And I said, I don't know. No idea. But that's what it is. It took 4 years of kind of convincing and talking about it. And he actually tried it with 40% alfalfa. It wasn't so much of a struggle because that spring it was pretty dry out there. So he had the ability to take his time, and it worked. It worked really, really well because a pasture is full of nutrients, tons of nutrients in there. Yes, I want you to have some fertilizer on it, but you don't necessarily have to fertilize a lot of it. And those bigger operations out west, you tell a guy he has to fertilize a quarter section or 400 acres. He says, I'll just buy another quarter section. What do I have to spend the money on fertilizers? It'll be the same price. So everybody has their strategy, but when you have the right kind of pasture mix, you have the species that feed each other too. And when people talk about, well, I don't want any clover, I'm worried about bloating, all true. Every operation is different. One guy just sends them out to pasture and doesn't see them for 4 months. Other guy brings in bales every day, right? So depending on what your operation is and how you feed, if there's a corral or there isn't, is how we build a mix, which really, I'm doing myself a service by saying it this way. But I think nowadays, farmers are so much smarter because of the exposure of everyone, social media, internet, that it makes a lot of sense for a guy to build a mix according to his own operation rather than Ian next door has a great field, you should try it. But Ian cuts 3 times a year and his ground is gravelly and open, he can go out anytime and your field's really heavy. So that approach of personalizing the mix for you, whoever you're dealing with, whatever company you're dealing with, it's important you know what piece of ground you have, how many cuts, are you making dry hay, are you not making dry hay? If you're making dry hay, you don't want to have ryegrass in there, you don't want to have any clover in there, and you probably don't want a lot of alfalfa. All these things come into play when we're kind of building the mix or something. Any questions about cover crops, by the way? Like, what to use as a cover crop or issues with cover crops that you have when establishing a new field?
So, getting back to the orchard grass that
Yeah.
we've got to plow up, if we were to take one crop of hay off that next spring, early, like I'm down cutting it around the 20th of May,
Yeah.
and then providing it's not so dry that you can't plow by the time we get around to it. If we were to plant late, like you said,
Yep.
feed that, could we plant the grass seed right in that time, just after plowing up the sod, or is that no good?
So let me ask you this, do you grow any wheat in your rotation?
We're permanent pasture, I don't ever wanna plow a field if I
Okay.
don't have to.
Gotcha.
So
gotcha.
that's a one-time thing, hopefully. I
So-
did it, we started that 5 years ago, but unfortunately, we used the neighbor's recipe, which was orchard grass. He was doing great.
Okay. So to answer that, I would say you're better off to take your first cut and second cut. Because if you seed something in June, you're probably not gonna take a cut till September if you take a cut. And we're talking about seeding a new permanent pasture? Okay, I would much rather see you do that mid-August, when you're not as busy in the field. Because not only will your alfalfa establish if you have any in your mix, and I always tell people you should have 20% alfalfa in there, because it won't be too much. The alfalfas are non-bloating, believe it or not. And on top of it, if it's dry, you'll have something. And you'll have the right kind of something. So let's just say you took your first cut, now you have a second cut. You didn't really lose on any feed. And grasses take a long time to establish. We know that. If you put it in August, you're gonna have a field established, not early spring, but by end of June the following year, you'll have a field. And ideally, if you can take your animals off at that point and keep them away early spring, because that's when it's wet, that foot traffic on new little seedlings really hurts it. That's a much better way to establish a field than being in a hurry, taking your first cut, killing it, working it, and then seeding it, and then hitting July, and hoping for rain in the month that typically is the driest month of the year. Fall seeding is something we believe in. We do a lot of it. Guys in Quebec that I deal with, people in Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, these are places that when I started talking about fall seeding, they all looked at me like I had three eyes. It's doable because the seasons are getting longer. We've seen a beautiful October last year. We've seen an amazing October this year. You couldn't screw it up like you couldn't.
Do you use a nurse crop with it when
No,
you seed in
no.
August? Just the grass?
You gotta direct seed it because that nurse crop on the wrong time of year will go flat. And if it's raining in September and you're trying to take your nurse crop off, or worse of it, the beginning of October, you're also gonna hurt what's underneath. So you direct seed it.
Direct seed.
And I would actually say that even if you got, to your first cut and took it off, I'd be scared to put a nurse crop pushing that time frame because the nurse crop is gonna get to the moisture before your grasses and alfalfa. So, if you're going early spring, I'm a big believer in a nurse crop. Why not? It shades your grasses, it helps your alfalfa, and it's extra feed.
So that would be the other option, is to plow it in the spring, plant it
Yes.
with a nurse crop.
Yes.
But, I had this idea in my head that because alfalfa is already growing there, it's not good to plant alfalfa.
So you have alfalfa in this field?
Yeah,
Right.
alfalfa and
So-
orchard grass.
So what you have to do is you have to burn it. And you have,
We're organic, we don't use any.
okay, got you. Well, I'll tell you this. If you're organic and you can't use a chemical, you're gonna have to deep plow that field.
Okay.
Again, the reason is, typically on a conventional farm, you burn it, then you plow it, because burning it doesn't necessarily mean it's going all the way down in the root, but that's why you gotta plow it too, break that root apart. Alfalfa in the first year of establishment, as a baby, doesn't have extra energy, which means at the end of the season, so if you planted it in spring, came the fall time, it uses every ounce of energy to feed the roots. That's why if a farmer seeded in spring and come the next spring and he calls me up and he says, well, first of all, they call you up and they say, your seed's no good. You sold me some common seed. There's gotta be something wrong with your seed. And then you come out and you realize it was a 14-year-old student who was putting it 1.5 inches in the ground and it's all buried. That's why it's patchy. But you can fix that. You can put alfalfa into alfalfa after the first winter, and it works. After 2 winters, on the second winter when it's going dormant, it has an abundance of energy which translates into toxins. And that will create a liliopathic effect, which means the alfalfa won't take. I wouldn't be scared for the 20% of alfalfa that I would recommend to you to put in that mix, because the worst thing that can happen is that it doesn't take because, you know, those roots were too deep and they survived. But you can thicken that up with grass for the rest of your life. You can keep adding grasses and legumes to it other than alfalfa for life. So that's an option. If you start seeing that this alfalfa isn't taking, but you have all this success with grass, no big deal. You guys too hungry? You want to stop for lunch?
I think you got a flight to catch.
No, I responded to something.
Oh, you did that. Sure.
Good?
So, once again, good afternoon. I am Donna, and I am the nutritionist of BioAg. Probably I have talked to some of you already over the phone, and this is the face behind the voice. So, today I will be discussing about the nutrition for highly stressed feedlot cows. This is the time of the year that there's a lot of cows that are being transported from the comfort of their own pasture homes to all the different feedlot cattle. And whenever cows step off the truck, they are not just tired. They are entering a perfect storm. There is weaning stress, there is transport stress, commingling stress, and new environment. So if we don't intervene nutritionally, immediately, the damage will compound fast. So here are the common stressors and their physiological effect. First, we go for weaning stress. Whenever we see an animal staying away from their peers, you could sense that they are experiencing weaning stress. And that is a problem because normally feed banks are located where most of the animals are gathered. So when they stay away from the peers, the tendency is they will be eating less. So there will be less feed intake. And also there will be prolonged vocalization, and that is a normal maternal separation stress or anxiety. And also there will be respiratory irritation because their immunity will be lower through lower feed intake, and that will cause compromising their respiratory system. Another is transport stress. Have you tried standing on a moving truck? Holding on to nothing. No, I'm not saying you try that, but I'm just saying that it is very stressful. It's very stressful for the animals whenever you transport them. And during that moment, their cortisol level spikes. Cortisol is a stress hormone causing a lot of damage to the system of the animal. And of course, during transport, there's feed and water deprivation, so there will be dehydration. And another is commingling stress. Cows are very social animals. Whenever you mix animals from different farms, the tendency is they will have to reestablish the hierarchy. So there will be a lot of aggression. There will be pushing, headbutting, mounting to be able to determine who is the dominant and who are the subordinates. And those are very stressful. New environment stress. Everything is unfamiliar to them. The position of the feed banks is different, the peers are different, and also the diet probably will be different. So adapting to a new diet causes feed refusals, or it could cause also rumen adaptation lag. So what are the common nutritional consequences of this kind of stress? First is reduced dry matter intake. Whenever the dry matter intake drops, the supply of energy and protein will be inadequate for maintenance, let alone for weight gain and also for immune response. And there will also be rumen microbial disruption. whenever the rumen microbes are disturbed, there will be lower digestion of fiber. And if there's a lower digestion of fiber, there will also be lower production of volatile fatty acids. Volatile fatty acids are the main source of energy of your cows. Immune demand will also increase. Whenever your animal is on stress, the body of the animal will prioritize combating the stress. So all of the energy will be allotted to combat the stress. So it has no more energy for weight gain and also for other immune responses. Oxidative stress is elevated. The body of your animal is like your snow plowing truck. So during winter, they work harder and they work faster to remove all the snow. So during stress, the body of your animal is working harder and also faster to remove the effect of the stress. So what happens is they produce a lot of free radicals, which are very toxic to the animals because they bind a lot of nutrients. So those nutrients, instead of being absorbed, they will be eliminated in the body. So your animal will not be able to use it. So they need antioxidant that comes from vitamins or also from seaweeds. And the demand for antioxidant will be higher during stress. Because if we don't address it, there will be a lot of damage in the rumen microbes. We all know this stress. We're not new to this stress. We know it and we know the consequences. And stress will always be there. We cannot eliminate it. We just have to lessen the impact. And there's a lot of study that has been made on how to lessen the impact of stress. And I will be showing you some few studies that has been done that show that somehow they have an effect in lessening the impact of the stress. This one study is about using flavoring. And the purpose of this study is to see if you give your animals some flavor, will they improve their feed intake? So they use 3 kinds of diet. One is one without the flavor. The other one is one with sweetener. And the third one is one with mixed flavor. So they use some sweet and salty and some umami flavor. I hope you're familiar with umami flavor because it's more of an Asian kind of flavor. It is what you taste whenever you have a Chinese takeout. So based on the study that they have made, they found out that when the feeds have flavors on them, it increased the feed intake. And also, it translated to weight gain. So more feed intake, more weight gain. However, when they see if the weight gain compensated the feed intake through looking at the FCR, they found out that the control without the flavorings as compared to the diet with flavorings are just the same. However, the main message here is whatever that can stimulate feed intake early on with your calves helps them in recovery during stress. So if a flavor can stimulate feed intake, even though it doesn't improve their feed conversion rate, it will always be good because the sooner you will combat the stress. So it's up to you. Let's see more studies to see what fits. Another study has been done to see the effect of roughage or your forage level and also supplementing extra fat for your calves. So this study has been done for newly received feedlot calves. So they use two levels of forages. One is 30% and the other one is 60% of roughage. And they also use 2 levels of fat. One has 0 supplemental fat and the other one has 3.5 supplemental fat. And based on this study, they found out that those calves that are fed with lesser forage after their arrival perform better. So they have more feed intake, they have better average daily gain, and also better feed conversion ratio. And those animals that are fed with additional 3.5% fat also increase their feed intake, their average daily gain, and improve their feed conversion ratio. So the main message here is the animal benefited from additional energy they get from low roughage or for supplemental fat. This third study is about the use of some additive. This is a meta-analysis, meaning they studied a lot of studies. So they looked into 20 kinds of trials that has been done from 2005 to 2024, and all these studies compares the use of organic and inorganic minerals in stressed feedlot cattle. And based on the result, they found out that on all the 20 trials, when they use organic minerals, the average daily gain increased more than those diets that used inorganic minerals. Why is this? Because organic minerals are bioavailable. They can be used by the animals immediately. So though it doesn't increase morbidity and mortality, in the end, we can say that organic trace mineral support better growth performance in stressed newly received feedlot cattle. Why adding minerals is very important, especially those bioavailable ones. If you're going to look at this, these are the common forages we are using. They sure have a lot of nutrients on them, they have a lot of key strengths, however, they also have a lot of limitations. If we're going in, look into corn silage, they are good to use because they are high in energy and also they have high digestibility. However, they are often low in calcium and a lot of trace minerals like selenium, copper, and zinc. And the more you store them, the more its vitamin level declines. The same with alpha hay. Alpha hay is very good. It is high in protein and high in calcium as well. However, they also lack a lot of trace minerals. Grass hays are excellent fiber source and it's low in potassium. However, they are low in protein, low in calcium, low in phosphorus, and has a little level of vitamins. In the case of our cereal silage, they have moderate energy and protein. However, they are low in calcium and a lot of trace minerals. So this just goes to say that forage alone is not enough when raising our cows. And a lot of study has found out that 60 to 80% of the vitamins A and E of the forages declines as you store them. So aside from that, there are also a lot of regional deficiencies like selenium deficiency in British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, copper and zinc deficiencies in prairie areas, and there's cobalt deficiency in coastal and peatland areas. So if you're going to analyze the forages we are mainly feeding our animals, they are deficient in a lot of minerals and vitamins as well. If we're going to look into the philosophy of bioag, which promotes natural and holistic way of approaching our animals, approaching stressed animals, this is what we normally going to recommend you. First is we have to facilitate the adaptation. Very simple, you just give them palatable feeds and you give it to them consistently. And then we should give them clean water and make the bank easier to access. And if we're going for feed transition, make it gradual. Another thing is reducing the extra stress. They are already stressed, so we just have to reduce more stress. So first is giving them adequate bank space and shelter so that they don't have to fight for the space. And then as much as possible, if we know that they are already stressed, we minimize handling. And we give them with fresh feed and clean environment, good ventilated environment. After looking at the outside, facilitating adaptation and also removing extra stress, we're going to look at the inside. So what bioag will promote is to support the gut and the rumen of the animals. So during stress, their stomachs are acidic. So you have to use some buffer to prevent acidosis. So what are the buffers? Chewing is very important. Once your cows are chewing, it is very good because they are producing a lot of saliva, and that saliva is a natural buffer solution. And also, if you are using minerals, your mineral supplement also contains like calcium carbonate, which are buffer as well, and also they contain magnesium oxide, which is also a buffer. And they also need postbiotics for microbial balance. So your cow really thrive on the microbes that lives on their gut. So giving them postbiotic helps in proliferation of the microbes in their gut. So what are postbiotics? Postbiotics are lactobacilli fermentation product. It's like this. When good bacteria ferments the starch and the sugar, they produce a lot of metabolites. They produce bacteriocins, which are natural antibacterial. They produce enzymes, which helps digest the feeds better. They produce vitamins, enzymes, a lot of short-chain fatty acids, which are source of energy. So the bacteria produce all of that, and those are what we call postbiotics. So even the bacteria is already inactive, those metabolites still work on the rumen of the animal. It helps them regulate the pH of the rumen, help them stimulate the natural immune system of the animal, and also it makes the gut rumen healthy. And postbiotic is the main component of our biolab. Another is we have to support the gut by giving them effective fiber. So we have to give them some digestible fiber, not just kind of fiber, effective fiber, because it helps the rumen health. Aside from supporting the gut and the rumen, we also have to boost the immunity. Boosting immunity is giving them organic minerals like zinc, copper, selenium, and magnesium. Those are trace minerals, minerals that your animals needs in small amount, so oftenly neglected, but those are important for a lot of enzyme activities, not just fulfilling the requirement of your animal for minerals, but they help in a lot of metabolism processes of your animal. We can also give them vitamins and antioxidants. Most of the vitamins also serves as antioxidants because during stress, as I mentioned, they produce a lot of free radicals. So you need some antioxidants, and you can get that from your dried seaweed or your kelp. And hydration and energy for immune response is very important. As Dr. Catherine has mentioned earlier, like water is very important, and the source of energy is very important as well. This is the summary of what BioAg would recommend to you, and this is the practical implementation. So on arrival day, if you're sourcing your calves from other farms, ensure that calves have access to fresh, palatable starter feed, clean water, clean bedding, and minimize commingling stress. So I know this is a bit hard, like you just put them all together, but if you can sort them maybe by weight or sort them from the farm they came from, it will really be a big help. Then in feeding strategy, we give them just moderate energy dense ration, and together with good quality forage. And we should also always consider giving them targeted supplements like postbiotics and organic minerals. Third is we have to monitor intake closely. We have to really look after them because stressed calves are normally don't like to eat. So it's very important to look for the first and second day, the first 24 and 48 hours, because once they don't eat on that time frame, it have a big impact on the weight of your animal, final weight of your animal. And lastly, we have to manage the environment. As much as possible, reduce the heat or cold stress depending on what season it arrived to your farm. Then we have to ensure that there's enough bank space. Keep the feed fresh. as much as possible, avoid spoilage, remove whatever that has not been eaten, and good ventilation is really a plus. To wrap it up, high stress would mean low feed intake, there will be a lot of movement challenge, and there's more sickness risk. So in nutrition strategy, we must address intake stimulation. Anything that will make your calves eat would be a plus. And we have to support the rumen microbial support. And we have to support their immunity. Third is integrating research back practices into your feedlot operation can reduce morbidity and also improve gains and shorten adaptation period. So it would really be up to you to look into these research back practices and see what fits in your farm. And lastly, we have to align the philosophy of natural nutrition rather than heavy reliance on pharmaceutical. So thank you for listening. If you have other questions, then just let me know.
We do grass-fed beef, so there's quite a discussion about feeding any grain at all. Some people don't feed any grain at all. We do allow some grain in the marketing group that I belong to. Because there's so many advantages to be able to get supplements into the calves, especially in this critical post-weaning stage. My question is whether, if you have an idea of at what level of grain feeding does begin to possibly compromise the health of the rumen? If you're going to create a cutoff, where would you set it?
If you're going to introduce some levels of grains, like at what level? As I've said, gradual transition to grain feed is very important. You can start with 10% at least, and then go along and observe. It's really important to observe our animals because it is only then we would know what they would really need. And we will be amazed by how your animals as well know what they need. And they will let you know by the signs they will show you. And later on, I will be discussing you some of the monitoring practices of the animals in terms of feeding ravages. Okay. If you don't have any other question, anyway, I'm still here, so if something comes into your mind, you can still ask me. Then I will give the floor to Dr. Kat.
So, early calf nutrition. So what does a calf eat? So it's very easy.
Milk.
Milk. Colostrum first, yes. And then milk, right? First days, you've got colostrum, about a week or two, mainly milk. But what you're actually forming with a young calf is you're growing a healthy rumen. So that is what you want to focus on. Because a healthy rumen means a healthy animal, right? So, I'll start with colostrum though. And everyone knows how important it is for calves to get that colostrum within the first few hours. Even 12 hours, I think is way too long. You're aiming for probably 6 hours, they should have that colostrum. Now, do you know how much colostrum your beef cows are producing for their calves? Any idea at all?
100 G's.
100 G's? Okay. Yeah, so that's what a calf needs to consume. But do you know, does anyone know how much milk that is actually in that udder? And that's the challenge with beef animals. Because you're not milking them like you are with Holstein cows or with dairy cows. You're just hoping that she's got enough milk in there, right? So instead of going around and checking every cow, stressing everyone out, you are going to make sure with nutrition and with management that you are almost 100% sure that there is milk, that there is colostrum in that udder, right? So that's kind of what we're going to go through. Yeah, I mean, there's always cases where either the calf is weaker or for some other reason she doesn't have colostrum, and you need to be there and you need to know that and monitor at those times. But I'm gonna give you all the tools to make sure that you can do as much as you can to make sure she's got enough colostrum. And then after colostrum, it changes to milk. So you also need to make sure that cow is making enough milk for the calf, right? So same thing, you're not going and checking udders. You can maybe see when an udder is overfilled, but that's about the extent. And if the calves are really healthy and they're suckling well, it almost looks like she doesn't have much in her udder, but that's because the calf is clearing it. So you're also watching the calf, see how it's filling out, and things like that. So for the first 2-3 days, it's very important to be watching both the cow, her udder, and the calf for fill of milk, right? And if you think there's something wrong, you isolate her, you check her udder, you check the calf for fill, and you make sure that they got colostrum and that they're getting milk as well. Yeah, and like I said, you're turning the calf from a single stomach animal into a ruminant. And with dairy calves, you kind of push it a bit. You want them to be a ruminant by 8 weeks. With beef calves, I don't think it happens that quickly. But you start on day 1. Because all the bacteria that they're going to be ingesting are then going to be becoming part of their digestive tract of their ruminant. All right, so when do you start focusing on the calf? At calving, before calving, maybe 2-3 weeks before calving, you start thinking there's a calf in there. At conception, or even before conception. What do you think the right answer is? Okay, you guys know. So something to think about, right? Like when she's still nursing her last calf, she is putting nutrients into her next calf, right? That is your next calf. Okay. So for the first few weeks of life, this is going to be a little repetitive. Colostrum, obviously. If anyone has any questions or problems with colostrum specifically, getting it into them, let me know now.
Okay, so being an old dairy farmer, we would always milk the cow, feed the calf.
Yeah.
Then let it suck for a couple of days, but if it didn't suck, it didn't matter because
Right.
you put it into them, right?
Right.
Now, can't do that with beef cow. At least I haven't been successful at
You need a really good chute.
it. So milking a beef cow is a different kettle of fish there. But like, does it matter if we do decide to give it colostrum, if we get colostrum from another dairy farm, or we buy the colostrum? What would be your, like the powdered stuff that they sell at the vet clinic?
Yeah, so the best is if you happen to have milked another cow in the herd for colostrum, and you're able to save, that's the best. The next, make friends with a dairy farmer. So we supply our beef farmer friends with cow colostrum. The powdered is better than nothing. So if you really are unsure, you don't think that calf got enough, that is when, you don't ha about that, just go and get some. Now the trick is, there's 2 types, there's replacer and there's supplement. So if you think the calf has gotten no colostrum at all, you need the replacer. So that is all the 100 Gs of antibodies that calf needs. If you think, okay, probably suckled a bit, but it could use more, then you're going for the colostrum supplement. You have to make sure you're getting the replacer. So so that's kind of the order of, and it's, we used to have the protein feed, which you could give orally, but that's been, the company has, right, Noah, stopped making the protein feed? Noah, no more protein feed? Yeah, so the company stopped, there are other ones in the States, other companies in the States that make a similar product, but to get anything into Canada is a bit of a hassle.
And there's a difference in colostrums as well, right, Catherine? Like you've got different manufacturers.
For sure, I haven't really looked into it much, so there hasn't been any complaints about one versus the other. The Canadian one is the Saskatoon Colostrum Company? I think they do a decent job. I know how they handle their suppliers. Like there's hygiene involved, there's cleanliness, like they have them freeze it within a certain amount of time and they do testing. So generally what's available is decent quality. And then you have to make sure you mix it up properly too. So you don't want to use water that's too hot, you'll burn the antibodies and you'll basically make it unabsorbable to the calf. Like you want to feed it, you always want to feed milk if you're supplementing at body temperature or a little warmer so that you don't chill that calf. Even if it's warm out, you can still chill the calf's stomach if you're feeding cold milk. Yeah, so does that answer your question? Okay. All right, so after they drink their colostrum, it's not colostrum to milk, we've got transition, right? So that's usually not a problem with beef guys. Dairy guys will stop at one feeding of colostrum, and I think that's lost potential, but obviously the calf is going to be continuing with the transition milk. There's still lots of nutrition in that. And what's in that milk? Well, we have fat, protein, we have hormones, to both help with the calf's immune system and growth. You have probiotics in there, there's bacteria in milk. You have enzymes to help break down the milk. You have sugars that provide energy. After the first few days, if you have a really good herd that takes care of their calves really well, you will see the babies start to munch on hay. They don't need it, but they'll start to experiment with hay. I know our dairy calves, they are chewing cud at about 3 weeks old already. So that's telling me I've done a good job getting the rumen going. I think it's probably too early because they're still babies, but we run a dairy farm, so that's just how quick they need to become ruminants. And then I have a bit of a beef with grains and starter at a young age. Mainly because they cannot digest it. They don't have the enzymes, the amylase, in their stomachs to digest grains until they're 3 weeks old. And then also because, have you ever put grain into milk in an enclosed container without air? What would happen? It would get pretty gross. It would start fermenting and making gases and just going bad because the starches and the sugars, starches in the grain and the sugars, they don't mix. So you're creating like a, perfect storm. And I think a lot of scouring happens when the milk and the grain mix that kind of like spews into the rumen. The young rumen, developing rumen, sits there and just creates this disgusting, toxic sludge that the calf can't get out because it's not using the rumen yet. So I tend to not recommend any grains or starter until at least 3 weeks of age, but if your cows are producing enough milk for the calves, there's no reason they need that extra energy yet. So if they do need that extra energy, you're doing something wrong with the cows. They should be more than capable of providing enough milk until that calf is much older. So that's kind of why I don't recommend any grains, especially for the first little bit. You want to provide your calves with a creep area, but I'm not going to say grains at first. So you want them to have access to clay, kelp, salt. In order to grow a rumen, you need salt. So a rumen is like an inland sea, so like saltwater sea. So you need the salt to be able to run the reactions that happen in the rumen. And then obviously probiotics. We have a whole lot of people that swear by the BioLac, Biocharge, just getting the good bacteria in there first. And there's multiple different ways of doing that. If you prefer patching them with the liquid or providing it in the mineral or the kelp. And how important it is to get it into them depends on how severe your issues are. So let's say you have every calf scouring, well, you will definitely want to catch those guys and treat them with the probiotic or the postbiotic, Biolac, I'll call it Biolac from now, Biolac the first few days of life. And the rumen requires fodder for development, not grains. Not at all. A ruminant grew up, was developed on grasses, not on grains. And then you have to understand that the calf is eating whatever the mother is eating, right? So if her gut is inflamed, that directly translates to the milk, and then the calf's gut will also be inflamed. So things that can cause that are high protein levels. So let's say cows are doing great, you let them out in lush pasture, all of a sudden everybody's scouring. What's happened is that the high protein levels, low fiber levels have caused the rumen upset. There's high nitrogen circulating in the blood, and that goes into the milk, and the calf drinks that, and that creates inflammation in the calf's gut. And then another reason could be that could happen could be toxin. So any toxin seems to be concentrated in the milk, which is really bad for the human population who's drinking a lot of cow's milk. So any toxin she seems to be putting in the milk. And I think it's partially also because the normal detox pathways aren't working properly in your dairy cows, so the liver is supposed to process it and then send it out, but a lot of it ends up in the milk. Okay, any questions about that? Comments, certain scenarios?
Just get back to colostrum. Like we do the same thing. We have a neighbor who has some dairy cat. There's no harm in like freezing that colostrum and thawing it out.
Yeah, no, if they're like, I'm not freezing it, you come pick it up, yeah, no, that's, and you wanna, I mean, to a certain point, you wanna freeze it slow and then warm it up slow.
Yeah.
So
You don't put it in the microwave.
don't put it in the microwave.
Yeah.
Then, yeah, you might as well feed the cow Gatorade.
When you say warm it up slow, like it's frozen, so I mean, you're gonna have to put it in hot water.
Yeah, you put it in hot water,
Yeah.
but you don't like boil it.
Yeah.
Right. And one more point, I wanted to raise this, because this happens, I know this happens to guys sometimes. You have this really beautiful cow, doing well, it's the biggest cow, you come out and it's dead. What happened? Any idea? The vet will tell you, oh, it's Clostridium, right? And Clostridium's everywhere, it's in the environment, you can't avoid it, you need to vaccinate against it. But my theory is that, especially on your grain-fed birds, what you've created is milk with grain, overflow into the rumen toxic, dead within 24 hours. That's what we call Clostridium. All right, so what does the cow need to make high quality colostrum for the calf? So both in volume and in immunoglobulins, so antibodies for the calf. So you need to increase the protein level of her diet before she calves. So, and you always want to do transitions slowly. So 6 to 8 weeks before they're going to calve, you need to change the type of hay. I'm not saying get soybeans, I'm saying change the type of hay that you're using. So you need to know what hay you have on farm, and you're going from a dry cow who needs very little protein, still some energy, high fiber, but now that she's finishing growing that calf and thinking about milk production, she needs hay that supports that, right? So that's when you save higher protein hays and you transition them slowly onto that. You also want to provide selenium and vitamin E, so that helps the immune system of the cow and helps her make antibodies to put in the colostrum. And then we already kind of went over this. For every calf, ask yourself, do you need to feed it supplemental colostrum, or are you comfortable that it got enough?
I have a question,
Okay, you know,
grass
the
mixing
protein.
all year round to diet to cows, right?
It's-
They're pasturing in the summer, but they're not, when they're calving, we calve in January.
Yeah.
So I don't use that high protein hay.
I'm not
I feed
talking,
that to my feeder cows.
sure, but I'm not talking about 20% protein hay, I'm talking about 14
Okay.
versus like 9, right?
It's just not real terrible hay, but
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in order to know that, you have to test your haze. Like a first cut might meet that criteria, right? Like an early cut, first cut. And then depending on, what was his name from Pro Ridge, she was talking about types of grasses too, that plays into it, and how much, the level of legumes in that hay. You should have, because she's going to need a different type of feed, you should have different hays available. And that's the easiest way to do it rather than going for a soybean and corn supplement, right? Okay, a little bit more about colostrum. Yeah, so energy, they need higher energy, they need proteins, minerals and vitamins. You wanna increase, and of course, increase the supplementation at that point as well. You also wanna change to a higher calcium, mineral. So this is all 6 to 8 weeks before they start calving. Obviously, you always want to reduce toxins. You want to reduce stress. So that goes a little bit more in how you're managing your close-up mothers and how you're calving them in. Are you just letting the group all stay together and kind of watching them, or are you separating out and making sure that, or calving them in kind of separately and then sending them back out? You want to support gut health at this time too, because if she is in nutritional stress before calving, that will pass directly on to her calf when she calves in. And then you want to provide extra antioxidants because her immune system does take a dip at calving. I don't know if that's partially because she's got more, a higher demand for making the colostrum, or if it's because that the normal part of giving birth, you have, so that there's no rejection of the fetus. But that means you need to support that immune system, so it's a stressful time for her. And then you also want to control the environment. So I hope you guys are not calving in -10 weather outside, please, because that won't work.
You can have -40 unless you can every day.
Yeah. Once you have your animals, you've done great selection, you have your animals on a really great nutritional plane, I can see it happening. But it's just like saying, all the soil here in southwestern Ontario is completely balanced and will provide all the nutrients for your animals. Like, it's just not, right? It's just not gonna happen. So, if that calf, born wet, gets chilled, you're already so far behind. So you wanna prevent that from happening. And like I said earlier, they can't regulate their own body temperature until they're 3 days old. So if they're under 15 degrees Celsius, they're in an environment under 15 degrees Celsius, they're gonna be cold. They're gonna be chilled. Once they reach 3 days of age, they can do a lot more, but until they're 3 days of age. And basically, if they're chilled, their gut stops. And then to try to get that gut going again, that's really hard to do. It's possible, but it means you're taking that calf inside near a heater and you're warming it up. And so that's why you also don't try to feed a calf that's chilled. Because it can't, it'll probably overflow into the rumen and just make the calf really sick.
So, just have a little bit of an issue with that.
You have to build a new barn.
Because, you're talking about a dairy farm there, because you've got all the cows, they're all contained, and you put them in the cow pen. Most of us have barns where the cows go in and out. They go outside to eat at the feeder. There's always a stupid cow that goes and has a calf.
Far, far.
Yeah, there by the
Yeah, but why does she go there?
So we try to get, see the ones that are gonna have and put them in a pen, but that's not always work. But my experience is, maybe some of the other guys have different experience, cold is not a problem. Dry and the calf getting licked off by the mother and sucking, fine. 40 below is okay. Can't be in the wet, can't be in the wind. It's gotta nurse.
Yeah, you
But if it nurses, then these barns are cold. Our barns are as cold as the weather is outside, and most of the calves are fine. It's minus 20, minus 30 in there, and the calf is fine. So you say they don't regulate the temperature. All those calves should die.
Okay, I agree with you, it's the cold and the wind for sure. But you have, let's say you have a new mother, she might not go to her calf, start licking her calf right away, especially if she's stressed. You let that one slip through, calf gets chilled, like, because they're worth a lot right now. So even losing one calf, like if you're able to implement a system, I'm not saying keep them in for 3 days, I'm saying let them bond. It could be for as little as 4 hours, just till they're going, and then they can go back out. Because yeah, you'll get times where everyone's going, right? You can't do that for everyone. But you pick the ones that you think are highest risk, you bring them in, you give them that time, and that will save you loads and just create a better animal all around. Just those few extra hours of attention. You could throw every other mineral supplement at them and every other perfect, like, Medicaid, whatever you want at them. There's nothing better than just paying attention for those 4 hours and making sure they get the colostrum and they're warm. And then, yeah, then you can ignore them for the rest of the summer.
So if I get a calf, and the calf is chilled, what I heard you say was I'm not supposed to give that calf anything.
You cannot feed them until they're inside or until they're warmed up. Their body temperature is back to normal.
So that's what my normal practice has been, and somewhat successful and sometimes not, is to give them colostrum immediately and then cover them.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing you say, I cover them, warm them up, then give them colostrum.
I mean, you want to warm them up. You don't want to wait 6 hours.
No,
They need to warm up, like, not too quickly, because that can also put the body in shock, but you want to be warming them up before, otherwise they're not digesting the food. So as long as, might be fine as long as they warm up quick enough to start digestion again. But potentially, if they're not warming up their body temperature and that milk is sitting there too long, you can start, they can either leave the stomach undigested or start cracking up.
Okay, so if the calf, like if I have a calf that is chilled, my practice has not been to warm it up first.
Yeah, so, I mean, it all has to happen within half an hour,
Okay,
right?
sure.
So, yeah, so I would warm it up first. And how many of you ever have to tube a calf? Okay, yeah. And how much colostrum are you tubing? Or how much milk are you tubing at once?
About a liter.
Because there's some guys that'll tube 4 liters and that's just,
Or you're gonna fill the calf up. So.
yeah, exactly. Way too much. The stomach can't hold that much. Okay. Yeah, so tubing can save a life, but if you can work that extra 10 minutes to get it to suckle, that's so much better.
Yeah,
Because
for sure.
you make sure that the milk or the colostrum goes into the stomach, into the right spot, and gets digested. And then you're also creating, once it's suckling, it's creating bicarb and enzymes to help digest the milk. If that's a place where you might use something like the Biolac. If there's no suckle, you have to wait for the digestive system. That's where you start using things like Biolac right away. Normally, I say don't use it before colostrum because the gut is open. You don't want anything else being absorbed other than colostrum into the gut, that first feeding. After that, that's when you go in with the Biolac. But always basically unadulterated colostrum first. And then same goes for electrolytes. If you end up having to tube or feed electrolytes, don't choose high energy. You won't rehydrate the calf. Don't mix it with anything. It needs to go in as a perfectly balanced bolus in order for the body to take in all of that water that you're providing the calf. If you put anything in, you're actually going to pull water out of the calf and dehydrate it more.
So let's talk about that. So whenever I feed colostrum, I always mix warm water with it. You're saying not to.
Don't ever mix water with colostrum or milk because
Or milk with, electrolytes.
electrolytes, no. So the electrolytes are,
Giving them the raw electrolytes then?
no, you mix it with water.
Right.
To whatever the package says.
Right.
But it's formulated in a way that the charges inside of that liquid make it so that it is absorbed in the gut almost instantly into the body. So if you mess with those charges, you add something or you take away something, dilute it too much, it won't be absorbed as quickly and can even pull water out of the gut and dehydrate them more.
The high energy will do that every day.
Sorry?
The high energy electrolytes will dehydrate the calf.
Yes. Yeah. Some are worse than others, but you really only need that simple, normal electrolyte. Then there's all these frilly ones. But let's say you have a calf it's fine. It's just not doing the best and you want to give it some electrolytes, then it's fine, right? You can use the high energy, right? Yeah. But if you have a calf that's critical, like it's 5 to 10% dehydrated, it's critical that you give it the non-high energy electrolytes at mixing directions without anything else. And then you want to wait an hour before you offer milk or put milk in. And then same thing goes for, let's say you had to tube the calf milk because it's not eating. Wait 4 hours minimum to give electrolytes because it might be even slower if they're sick. It takes at least 4 hours for the milk to clear the stomach. So then if you were to add electrolytes in, will it be the same as tubing the electrolytes mixed with the milk? It won't accomplish anything. See, the milk is basically curdled right away when it enters the stomach from the acids. So that if that curdling can't occur, it doesn't get digested further down.
How do you feel about the ADA lactobacillus bolus for calf? We usually only have one opportunity to do anything with the calf. That's when we
Right.
catch it and tag it and band it if you have to. So, I mean, just as preventative, because you talked earlier about ADE.
Yeah, I mean, it could help. I mean, don't make sure you're not interfering with the colostrum absorption. So don't give it too early. If it's a lactobacillus, it'd be similar to the Biolac. The Biolac is a postbiotic, so Donna was explaining that you don't actually need it to survive in the gut. It's already active as like a prebiotic to help immediately. Like the components in there go to the immune system in the gut and say, like, wake up, it just supports basically all the signaling for the immune system.
So that would be preferable to the ADA.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have vitamins, yes. But I can't speak to whether or not, like, the Biolac would be a better probiotic if you're going for that fruit. I know the Biocharge has ADNA, like it already has it in it. So you're doing the same thing, yeah. I don't know what else they add in there either. Some products have all this other stuff in there. I don't know, sometimes it's for palatability, sometimes it's on a corn distiller, but something like that you don't want in a calf gut first few days of life. Forget where I was. Okay, we'll move on to management strategies, which we've already covered So overall, 3 goals: low stress, maximizing the bonding and colostrum consumption, and then shelter from the elements. So however you can achieve that. So low stress means no overcrowding, no unnecessary mixing. Make sure cows have feed bunk access. So when they're heavily pregnant, they need more feed space than when they're lactating or at other times of their life, because they're baby girls, right? So do you have enough feeder space for everyone to eat? Water access. If you need a calving pen, that's something you can implement. Maybe it's just for a year or two till you have the cows back on track and more vigor in your calves, right? We already talked about calves being wet when born. You could also potentially manage your first calf heifers differently, or anyone you think would be more at risk. So you're watching them more closely, or you're bringing them in. Just to make sure that, or just because you know they might struggle, so you can be there watching them. So yeah, like I said before, putting in extra time and space at this stage will save you a lot of headaches and resources later on. And yeah, a little bit more of the same thing. Hygiene obviously is important. Clean pens. I know a beach guy that goes through 100 bales of straw a year, but it's within 2 weeks during his calving, right? So he puts the resources in there. Yeah, so, and having strong calves requires planning and foresight. So everything you do, everything that the cow, or you give to the cow, or how you manage the cow, affects how strong that calf will be at birth. And a stronger calf means gets to the udder quicker, is up quicker, just does better overall. And you want the birthing process to be pretty quick. And you need warmth. So we already went over all of that. And yeah, so now I want to talk a little bit about nutritional strategies for the cow. So like I said before, you want a close-up ration 6 to 8 weeks before calving to transition them into lactation. Because not only are they growing a calf inside, they're starting to grow milk. So you want to increase energy, protein, calcium, and you're providing extra minerals, vitamin supplementation, including salt, because it requires salt to make milk. Kelp and postbiotics, and then selenium, vitamin E. How many of you guys treat your cows with selenium E before calving? Okay, so I would do that. So best case scenario, you put it in the mineral, right? But it's really hard, especially in a free choice system, to ensure that they get the proper amounts. So what I recommend is selenium vitamin E injections 20 days before calving. And you have to estimate, right? Because not everyone's going to calve the same day, but approximately 20 days before calving. So beef cows supplemented with selenium and vitamin E had greater colostrum antibodies. And then calves born to the supplemented cows had higher post-supple serum concentrations of the antibodies. So not only was there higher antibodies, but the calf actually absorbed them.
Could that be done earlier? I'm just thinking, opportunities to do it would be when we're pregnancy checking in November, be 2 months before they're starting to calve. But
It would be a little early. What you could do is do it then and then give the calf, but it's definitely more beneficial to do it at the time of like the colostrum production, because it does clear. What you could do is supplement in the mineral, but then still do an injection when you can get at them. Yeah, so that, yeah. And I find, because I was trying to figure out why why would we have a soil that's selenium deficient? Why is that? Because we know that here in southwestern Ontario. Is there a reason? Do we actually need selenium? Like, a lot of, like the native species seem to grow fine without it, right? So I'm wondering, because if you have a deficiency in sulfur, sulfur can kind of make up for selenium in a way. So selenium is a major antioxidant, so is vitamin E, but sulfur is a big part of the detox process. So I'm saying that if you have selenium deficiency and sulfur deficiency, you're gonna have bigger problems. So if your sulfur is at a proper level, then the selenium doesn't seem to be as important. But to get there, you need the selenium and vitamin E first. And they always have to, the injections, they come together. They always have to be together. And then if BioEye makes a mineral, we also put in the selenium with the E, just to make sure they work together as an antioxidant.
Quick question, Catherine.
Yep.
Does it make sense then to be applying sulfur, if we know we're deficient in sulfur on the soil, does it make more sense to be applying it on the soil, so it's more available there? Does that help with your selenium?
Yeah, no, it won't actually increase selenium. It just seems to be that as long as you have proper sulfur, selenium's not as important in the body. So they kind of like help each other, the minerals. And then if you're putting it on the soil, yeah, good idea, but you never know how much is actually absorbed. So you could do a feed test, and if you see that it has been absorbed, then you can be more confident in saying that, yes, they're getting that amount of sulfur, for sure.
We've applied it now 2 years running, we've applied sulfur, and we knew we were deficient, we did soil tests. And we've noticed that the cows have done better since we've applied it.
Right, yeah, so it's a major detox mineral, so it would help with all the processes and stress and immune system, toxins that are released in the body, yeah. Yeah, have you checked your soil to see, or sorry, your feeds to see if there's increased levels there?
Because we haven't looked too close,
Right,
but we've definitely seen like even a yield improvement on the forages,
Right.
just from
Yeah.
having sulfur in there.
right. And you were deficient.
And we just tested our soil again, I'd have to look at the report again if we're still, I think we're still on track where we have fixed our deficiency.
Right, yeah. And you can feed it to the cows as well, to get it going faster. I mean, it's a system, right? Most of us have the system where the manure goes back on the field and then the cow. So that helps with the postbiotic, the Biolac 2. You're giving it to your cow, but you know what? It's ending up in the microbes in your field, those effects, right? And they're gonna grow a healthier plant, and that goes back to your cow. So it's the whole system you're nourishing, if you have that type of closed system. Any more questions about nutrition around calving? Yeah, so you have to kind of treat them like a dairy cow, I'm sorry. Unless you've selected your herd to be top notch and everything's perfect. I mean, you can get there, I believe it.
Well, you know, what's so different, I mean, is that you don't have breeding dates.
Yeah, for sure, yes.
So you can't really,
No.
say, oh, this one's due on that date, I'm gonna keep her in now. It's like,
No, but
you go out
you,
in the morning and there's a calf laying there by the feeder.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
just
but
the reality.
potentially, was she kicked out, like, was she bullied out of the barn?
No, they go out to eat. So they eat outside of the feeder and they come in and lay down in the bedding pack. That's the way our barn is set up.
She felt the safest there. How much feed space do you have per cow?
But that's one thing I actually made note of.
Okay, good.
Is put in another feeder.
There you go.
Just so there's lots of,
There's 2 places for them to go.
yeah, yeah. So that's an easy fix. But,
Yes. It's things you don't think about, right?
yeah.
It really is. The biggest eye-opener for me was when I took cow signals course. He's a Dutch vet, very eccentric. He's fun to watch and listen to. But he showed you things like that, like simple things that you wouldn't think of, right? Like, and that's what it comes down to, is just learning those things and learning to observe, and also trusting your observations, right? If you're seeing something, farmers are the smartest. You have a brain to think, well, sometimes I think there's a block there and you're like, well, the other guys do it, I can do it. Like, why are they working for me? Well, you have a brain, think through it. Because it's probably a little bit different in some way. And every farm is unique, right? Okay, so just a little bit about alternative and supportive care around calving. So the postbiotics, the Biolac, definitely provide salt for everyone, because the cows will need more salt. So I would say loose salt, they can consume it quicker. Cows need to make milk. Calves need to grow their rumen. Kelp for trace minerals and antioxidants. And then your calves in the creep feeder, I want to talk about this. You don't want grain, not right away. You want highly digestible hay, so they can start learning to be ruminants on forage. So that you want them to have good hay. Now, if your cows already have that, that's great, and they should actually, because they're making milk. But if you're gonna do a creep feed system where you feed the calves extra, I would suggest starting with a highly digestible hay. Once they have that hay rumen and they have a good buffering system, then if you need more energy, you can start introducing the grains and the starters. And that'll make a healthier body in general. So you reduce the chance of acidosis, you reduce the chance of inflammation, because acidosis and inflammation increases the chances of coming down with scours, coming down with pneumonia. So it's not even the fact that their immune system is not getting enough nutrients, it's the fact that their body is in the wrong pH. And it's allowing something to take hold that naturally wouldn't. And then there's homeopathics. I can advise you on that if you're interested in implementing a homeopathic program. So there's things you can give before calving just to help them, help with easy calving, and then the calf at birth too. But yeah, just remember you're growing a young rumen, and they're going from milk feeding to having this amazing organ that can do so much. And that is the goal, is to have a healthy rumen, because then everything else will just fall into place.
We're just right on time, so we will be finishing early, and this is the last topic. So I will be discussing about improving feed utilization. Many of you have probably asked at some point, how long will my hay last this winter? And that actually leads to a bigger idea, like how well my cows are using the feeds I'm putting in front of them, and that is feed utilization. Feed utilization is simply how much of the feeds you're giving your animals are actually being used for source of energy, for maintenance, for weight gain, for immune response, and not wasted as manure, as feed refusal, or undigested feeds. Why should we talk about feed utilization? Why feed utilization matters? Feed accounts for 60 to 70 of your total operation cost. And according to Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, in 2024, feed accounted for 68.48% of your operation cost. And operation cost doesn't include your capital cost, which is your animal cost, your depreciation, and other implements that you use. Operation cost just covers feed, yardage, interest, your marketing, and also your veterinary health expenses. So it is so big that just 2 to 3% improvement in feed utilization can translate into 1.5 to 3 kilogram increase in your finishing weight per cattle per cycle. And efficiency is also very important because it improves the sustainability. When your feed is efficient, it is very sustainable. It is eco-friendly. Nothing much will be wasted in the environment. No, not much nutrient leaks. And also, if your feed is efficient, it means that your cattle will be healthy. What influences feed utilization? We will be discussing four items. First one is your feed quality and the digestibility of your feed. Next one is the diet structure or your ration balance. Third is feeding consistency and bank management. And last is the gut health, which we might touch on also on stress and inflammation. In terms of feed quality and processing, your forage quality is highly affected by the maturity when you harvest them, how you store them, and some of the ensiling methods that you have used. And the measure of your forage quality is your forage digestibility. And forage digestibility can be measured by percent PDN, total digestible nutrient. So how would you know the PDN of your forage? If you have your forage analyzed, if you have your grain analyzed, it is indicated in the analysis the laboratory is given you. The higher the total digestible nutrient, the higher the digestibility of your feed. Also, the digestibility of your feed is also affected by grain processing, like steam flaking corn. The higher the starch digestibility, the more you process your corn, like you steam flake it, the higher the starch digestibility. It can increase by 8 to 12%. And also when you fine grind the corn, the starch digestibility will also be higher. However, there is a risk of acidosis. So we don't, as much as we want to use highly digestible feeds or forages, there's also a risk, which I will be discussing further later. And also, in terms of feed quality, it is important to know what is the moisture content and in turn, to know the dry matter intake. A forage that has 20% protein but 10% moisture is very different from a forage that has the same level of protein, 20%, but the moisture is 30%. They are two different forages. So it is wise to know the moisture level of your forage, as well as the TDN and all other that you can look in the forage, like the minerals, because it prevents miscalculation, and also it helps your nutritionist not to go guessing, but formulate a accurate, balanced ration for you. This is a study done by NASEM, National Academics of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. They studied different levels of TDN of forages, from 42% level of TDN to 70% level of TDN. And they found out that the higher level of TDN, the more your animals will eat, the higher the dry matter intake. So the more digestible your forage, the more your animal will eat. However, they also found out that when the TDN level or the digestibility of your forage reach above 70, the dry matter intake drops. And why is that? Because cow has a natural monitoring system. They know what they would eat, they know what would cause harm to them, because they would know that if the feed is too highly digestible, there will be faster production of volatile fatty acid. And since they don't need that much at the same time, volatile fatty acid will just accumulate, causing subacute acidosis. So they have this very natural way to monitor not to eat. So it's not always, if it is highly digestible, that doesn't mean it's always good for your cows. In terms of ration formulation, it is very important to balance the ration. There should be a balance of energy and protein. Your cows doesn't use energy and protein separately. It is being mixed in the rumen. And when energy and protein comes at the same time, the growth of the bacteria are better. And if one is missing, it means that the other will just be wasted. So they should always be in partner, they should always come at the same time. You cannot just say, oh, I just want high energy diet, or I just want a high protein diet. They should always be balanced. And also, we should always give them some effective fiber or your highly digestible fiber. Just right amount of digestibility. And aside from the energy and protein, we also have to balance the calcium and phosphorus. We always do that because the level of the other affects the absorbability of the other. So if you have too much phosphorus and less calcium, then most of the phosphorus will not be absorbed as well. So there should be a good balance. And aside from the calcium and phosphorus, which are macro minerals, we also look at the trace minerals. We have discussed this earlier. Trace minerals are zinc, copper, manganese, copper, selenium. Those minerals that are needed by your animal in small amounts. Because they don't just fill the mineral requirement of your animal, but they are involved in a lot of rumen enzyme activity, involving immunity, and they also have antioxidant capacity. And when choosing trace mineral, it is always better to choose organic versus the inorganic, because organic are bioavailable minerals. And in ration formula, we should always consider also using supplements. We mentioned vitamins and minerals, seaweeds for its natural vitamins, minerals, and prebiotic support, antioxidant as well. And I cannot emphasize enough that immune enhancers like lactobacilli fermentation product or the postbiotic, which is present in BioLac, is very important. This study was done by Transagra, where we sourced the main ingredient of our lactobacilli fermentation product, or the main ingredient of our BioLac. And they studied 9 different feedlot farms. Some of the calves were given diet without BioLac, and another one was given with BioLac. Very simple treatment design. So they found out that those animals that are given with diet with BioLac increased their daily gain by 17.7%. And why is that? Because their feed intake was stimulated. Feed intake was higher also by 11.7%. But the bigger question is that the gain in weight compensated for the feed intake because you spend some more because they have higher feed intake. And that can be measured by feed conversion ratio, your feed utilization, or feed over gain. And they found out that those given with BioLac has 15.9% higher FCR. And why is that? Because products like BioLac take care of the rumen. And rumen health is equivalent to feed efficiency. Because the rumen microbes are the one making the volatile fatty acid, and 70% of the energy requirement of your animal comes from those volatile fatty acid. So if there's a rumen dysbiosis, it means that there will be lower fiber digestion. Your forages will not be digested, and that will mean lower volatile fatty acid, lower energy, and then lower gain. So postbiotics and fermented products help increasing the volatile fatty acid production, and also it helps in rumen stability because it regulates the pH, it also stimulates the natural immune system of your animal. Aside from the forage quality, the ration balance, another thing that we can look into is your feed delivery and pack management. We must have some uniform TMR mixing to prevent sorting, and also it ensures that the intake is consistent. So we have to make sure that the sizes of your forages are uniform, because otherwise your feed will just be sorting them, and it will mean feed waste. Optimal moisture, we must look into the moisture level of your TMR, because moisture level improves mixability. An optimum level of around 45 to 50% is the best one in addressing sorting and uniform mixing. Consistent delivery times. What time you feed your animal yesterday must be the same time you will be feeding them today, and the same time you will be feeding them tomorrow. That's consistency. Because it reduces digestive stress to your animal. Bounce scoring. Probably some of you has already been doing this, or you might want to consider doing bounce scoring. So if you notice that the feed are all swept, they feed all the feeds you've given them, you can assign, for instance, 0. And then if you found out that the next day there's a small sheet left, you can assign 1, and so 2 or 3 and so on. So every day, looking into the feed bank give you a better idea, like, are they really eating? Do they need much? It give you a better estimate of how much should I give them tomorrow, or how much should I give them the next day, depending on how much is left. Or probably there's a problem why I've given this much, but they are not eating. Next is we have to avoid feast to famine cycle. You will begin giving them a lot today, and then you will be giving them none tomorrow. It's connected to the consistent delivery times. This one is consistent amount of feed given to them. So it's not enough that they eat a lot today and then tomorrow they will not eat. And we have to practice gradual feed increases. It means whenever we want to increase the feed intake of our animal, we have to do it gradually. And the optimum level is 300 grams increase per head per day. Next is, this one is reducing feed wastage. This is one of the most commonly neglected reason why feed utilization drops. Because shrink losses accounts for 5 to 20% if unmanaged. So we just thought what my animals didn't eat will just go to waste. But also those wastage blown by the air, spilled during feeding, we have to take account of that. Because those are the feed that should be converted to energy, converted to gain, but then it got lost. So in our feed storage, we very much as well cover them to improve our preservation, to prevent a lot of nutrients to just evaporate. And also, it is important to calibrate your scale to be more accurate, to really know how much you are giving your animal. To wrap it up, feed quality testing is really important. We really have to know the real value of your forages to be able to accurately do a ration for you. Balanced diet together with consistent feeding behavior improves gate to feed ratio. No matter how good your formulation is, your ration is, if you are not going to give it to your animal consistently, it will just go to waste. And rumen health is the foundation of efficiency. If your rumen function is good, when the rumen of the animal is healthy, it will also mean feed efficiency. Natural additives like postbiotic, I cannot emphasize that enough, and also organic minerals provide proven benefits. And I have showed you studies from my first presentation about organic minerals. I showed you a study with this presentation about postbiotics, and they have proven benefits. And management practices like bunks, mixing, storage influence the outcome as much as the ration. So that's it. Thank you for listening. If you have other questions, I'm here to answer any. Thank you.
I don't know how many other people feed dry hay like we do, but I'm just thinking when you're talking about the reduction of nutrition in the hay over time and the losses. Like, has anyone studied that to find out what the extra cost of
ways to improve the
Yeah.
quality of this. I haven't encountered study about that, but that one is like a good observation. I might start looking forward to see if wrapping will compensate with the nutrient losses. But as I have said, you preserve your hay or you ensile. The forages will always be deficient with a lot of minerals. You have to supplement anyway.
And you should test.
Yeah. Testing is really very important. It's really hard to go guessing because if you would see different studies, different analysis of the same forages, they differ a lot. So sometimes you wouldn't know if someone will tell me, can you formulate me a ration using corn silage? Like, which among of these analysis should I use for you? So it takes a lot of guessing, and as much as possible in ration formulation, you want to be accurate. And I hope you already know that if you want some testing, NOAA can have your sample and send it to them.
It's a good kind of business.
So are you thinking about wrapping dry hay?
Well, there's all kinds of options, but no issue. You could bale it up, wet, use less leaves. You get higher quality, higher protein, higher nutrients. Wrapping is stressful. And
Yeah, but you sure get a lot of benefit from it because when you ferment the
Yeah.
forages, they become more digestible. You get good bacteria as well, which are very helpful to the rumen. So, but yeah, you're right. We have to look for a study comparing like the expenses and the losses.
but from a as a nutritionist, like, let's just take cattle you're feeding, like yearling calves up to market weight, where they need they need a lot of energy. You would probably prefer to see a wrapped silage than a dry hay.
I would always recommend the combination of both.
So access to dry hay.
There should always be an access to dry hay. I feel a bit sad when a farmer would say, I'm only using
Right.
like too wet forages. If as much as possible, I wanted to recommend using something dry, and the combination of both always works better than just using one kind.
Okay, so I have another question on the wrapping, because when we have done wrapping, is the optimum moisture level, but most of the guys I talk to who wrap a lot of hay, just wrap it from morning till night, and they say it always turns out good. It doesn't matter whether it's 50% moisture or 25% moisture. What's your opinion on that?
Do you have an opinion on that?
I think I've had the same observation. We tend to wrap a lot of wetter stuff, like we're often cutting one day and baling and wrapping the next. And unless you do your end cap bales or your first two bales at the start and the end of the row, sometimes those don't turn out real great, but the rest of the feed always seems to turn out just fine, nice smell to it. Cows love eating it.
And it's ranging from probably about 50 down to 25 or. Yeah.
From our experience, you can make pretty good almost dry hay if you're in that 15 to 20 or even a couple into like 25. If you just bale it, I don't know how tight you're baling it, but we bale it loose and you wrap it. Or you have to be above 30. So there are studies that show that fermentation is wonky between like 25 to 40 because there's not quite enough moisture to ferment. So it kind of can go, so we've had that experience too, where the hay, I mean, it's still feedable, but it seems like they don't do as well on it. So either you make it really wet, 40 plus, or you keep it under 25. But that 25% stuff is really nice. You do have to make sure you use enough wrap. I don't think that it's, because it's drier, it'll keep with less wrap, because it's still.
So basically, you're making a dry feed then?
Yeah, you're dry
Wrap.
feed, but you're preserving it.
Okay.
So it doesn't go through fermentation We do that a lot because hay's almost dry, but not quite, but we have the wrapper, so we're like, just get it done.
But you're saying that's below 25.
Yeah,
At 25 to 40 is sort of the,
is the iffy range. We've had bales not, like, they look fine and they feed okay, but you can tell the quality is just not, and it's kind of, it smells off. Sometimes you'll get the tobacco smell in it. So, yeah.
maybe the reason we hear the anecdotes from people who just keep baling and it's always good is because it's drying out really fast and there's not many bales that are in that range. Right?
Just
Up to
miss the
25 to
ranges.
40 here. It's going below 25 pretty quickly on a nice day. But from 25 down to dry hay at 15 takes a real nice day. Some days it's just too
Oh,
humid.
yeah.